Frente 3 de Fevereiro, zumbi somos nós.
Welcome, everyone, to Resounding Visions. I'm Christine Diekman, a professor in the Department of Art, Media, and Design, where I teach film, video, and sound studies. And I'm also professor of Introduction to Sound Studies. It's one of the courses that is hosting our series tonight. And I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Professor Diaz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nisael Diaz. I'm an assistant professor of art, media, and design at CSUSM and the instructor of AMD 368, Art of World Cultures, which is the other course that is hosting the Resounding Visions speaker series this semester. To begin, we wanted to acknowledge the land that we all find ourselves on. We would like to acknowledge that we are speaking to you today from the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay peoples, that our presenters Daniel Lima and Felipe Teixeira will be speaking to us from the homelands of the Tupi-Guarani, and that the meeting place of CSUSM and its surrounding areas is still home to the 6 federally recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pechanga, Rincon, Soboba Luiseño, Payancawicham people. We would like to take this moment to acknowledge and express our gratitude, appreciation, and respect for those groups whose homelands we reside on and learn on, recognizing that they have been stewards of this land from time immemorial and continue to live on this land in spite of the ongoing violence of settler colonialism. We honor their resilience and strength and express solidarity with efforts to undo the intentional erasure of Indigenous peoples locally and around the world.
Thank you, Misael, for that beautiful acknowledgement. Let's just take a few seconds to absorb and project this resilience, strength, and solidarity. So welcome again to Resounding Visions. This is a year-long series of BIPOC artists, musicians, and scholars who work at the intersection of sound and art to explore forms of cultural resistance and affirmation. The programming committee for this series includes faculty members Misael Diaz, Christine Diekman, Ana Luisa Petrisco, and Jeff Ray. I want to extend a very special thank you to Steve and Laura Wagner and the Epstein Family Foundation for the generous funding that makes these events possible. We also want to thank the School of Arts staff for their excellent support. All of our presentations are online via Zoom, and there is a link provided before the presentation. Events are Thursday evenings at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. And we urge you to stay informed by following us on Instagram. And I will post this again in the chat so you can follow us there. Professor Diaz will offer more information and introduce our presenters for tonight.
So before introducing today's guest speakers, I wanted to let you all know that in lieu of using the chat to share questions and or comments with our presenters, we ask that you please use the Q&A function. We're going to be closing the chat shortly, so if you have a question or comment, please type it into the Q&A and we will make sure to try to address it. Today's presentation by Daniel Lima and Felipe Teixeira will last approximately 60 minutes. I think they're going to try to do 45 to open it up for questions and comments afterwards. We will be reading out loud those questions for our presenters from the Q&A. So again, if you have some questions or comments that you'd like for us to share, please type those into the Q&A. Now it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce our guest speakers for tonight. Daniel Lima is a Bachelor of Fine Arts, Master of Clinical Psychology, and current PhD student in Media and Audiovisual Processes at the University of Sao Paulo, as well as a member of the La Verte Media Laboratory. He is a multimedia artist that explores design and space in the urban environment. Coming from a trajectory of interventions in the metropolis of Sao Paulo, he uses visual resources to create unexpected and potentially deconstructive situations of the urban scene. He is also the director of the production company Invisíveis Produções. Felipe Teixeira Gonçalves holds a degree in international relations from the University of Sao Paulo and a master's degree in economics from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He works as an advisor to the mayor of Sao Paulo, is a DJ, and is currently working on the documentary Emergency Exit with Daniel Lima. Lima and Teixeira are part of Frente 3 de Fevereiro, an interdisciplinary collective founded in 2004 following the murder of Flavio Santana, a young Black student, by Sao Paulo police. Based in Sao Paulo, the group is composed of members working across various fields, including visual arts, performing arts, and academia. Their works, which take the form of urban interventions, research publications, documentary videos and films, cartographies, and musical recordings, seek to analyze and push back against racial injustice in Brazilian society, developing innovative forms of protest, which have included street actions about racist police violence, guerrilla interventions at soccer games, and an intervention on a high-rise apartment complex that was part of an activist campaign defending the homeless movement in downtown Sao Paulo. Their practice builds on the historical struggle and resistance of Afro-Brazilian culture to devise new ways of empowering communities to better understand and transform the dynamics that shape their urban environment. More recently, their work has interrogated the exportation and implementation of repressive control technologies beyond Brazil by undertaking research in Colombia and Haiti. In this way, they begin to trace common legacies of colonization, racism, and violence throughout the Americas, while prefiguring forms of transnational resistance and solidarity. Their work has shown internationally at venues that include the School of Art Institute in Chicago, Creative Time in New York, the Kunsthal Fridericianum in Kassel, Germany, the Medellín Encuentro at Museo de Antioquia in Medellín, the Museo Universitario de Arte Contemporáneo in Mexico City, and the Goethe Institute in Sao Paulo and Buenos Aires, Argentina. We're very excited to have them joining us tonight from Sao Paulo, so please welcome Daniel Lima and Felipe Teixeira Gonçalves.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good night. Felipe.
Hello, everybody. Here is good night. Over there, I think it's good afternoon. I don't know.
Good afternoon for us. It's almost midnight. Okay, let's start. First, thank you for the invitation. California State University, San Marcos, School of Art, Misael, Christine, thank you very much, and also Albert. We are happy to be able to collaborate with the studies of the Resounding Visions and be able to share our experience in the field of art and politicals. We are here focused on this kind of intersection between the visual art, political issues, and also music and sound design. I believe that we all already has saw the movie, Zumbi Somos Nós, and this will help us to maintain our program to 45 minutes and not explain all the movie, but only parts that is important for our presentation, and to go after to the questions, very interesting questions that we receive, and we are very, we want to talk about these questions very, very much. Thank you so much. So I will begin talking about this, the Frente de Fevereiro, the collective. So our narrative here, our line, it's the center is the movie. And the movie is important for us because they carry the proposal of the sound and the music construction, as also this disciplinary way to deal with the subject of the racism in the Brazilian society. But also, it's important to point that we trying to bring some kind of context, situation, and histories that precede the formation of the collective, and also talk a little bit about the time after the conclusion of the movie. All this kind of geopolitical research that we did after the movie, passing to Cuba, Colombia, Haiti, including United States. So we're trying to put some highlights in some points of this in a very quick way. The collective of Frente de Fevereiro collective started in 2004 in a tragic context that unfortunately happening still today in São Paulo, in all Brazil, but also in United States. So this kind of event that is tragic in the beginning, the collective, is the murder of a young Black man by the police. An innocent man killing by the police. And this happened until today in many cases, and we know all the violent event that we feel in the last years about this. This succession of the event of the death of a 28 years old young Black man, it's similar with that occurs until today in many cities around America. A young man was taken as a suspect of a crime. Approached by the police, he got out of his car, his own car, and was executed by the police officers. The police officers, realizing that they made a mistake, they put false evidence of armed confrontation, and also forged a drug possession in the young man. They remove Flavio Santana documents and present the crime scene, and also present the body without the identification, place it in a morgue as a homeless. This very sorry, but it's very violent and tough to hear about this. It would be another case of resistance followed by death. This is the expression of the police that they use when this kind of event that confront with innocent or even with some kind of guy armed result in death. Resistance followed by death. Without investigation in any kind. But we have a different situation in this case. His father was a retired police officer. And he know about this kind of underground and corruption practice of the corporation. He redone the steps of the case until find the body of the son and denounce the crime. So the case gains the media coverage, highlights, and the family, social movements, some politicals start to organize some events and some kind of actions around this case. Denounce police violence. And here we put some kind of highlight in this idea of police violence. And here my mother comes on scene. Maurinete Lima, it's my mother. It's a Black woman, sociologist, and retired for the university. She sees the case of in 2 points: the urgency and also the symbolic event. The urgency, the life is in risk. She said for us in one meeting, you can be the next. So this idea of the young Black crossing the city became the kind of focus of the police brutality. But also, he think about this idea of a struggle for life. We need to do something because we need to live in this society, and this is not don't need to happen again and cannot happen again. So this is idea. I will share my screen and start to show some images. Mhm. Here, I will start to show the book that we did with the movie. At the same time, we did the movie, but also a book. And the book was this kind of research in a deeper way of the movie, not with the music, of course, it's a book, but with a lot of the interview and the context of this case. We see here Flávio Santana image, and I will put some parentheses here to talk about this idea of urgency. I opened the parentheses. Let me try to put my image. Okay. I open a parenthesis here to highlight this idea of the struggle of life, the idea of urgency. What we're gonna see in that presentation, it's a kind of production of knowledge. But what kind of knowledge we can produce? And what kind of knowledge we need and we want to produce? This idea of the investigation in artistic creation, in this case, is mixed by the urgency. We put some kind of new paradigm in this kind of production of knowledge. In academic field, the tradition is to separate the subject and the object. And the idea of this kind of investigation, it's mixed these 2 points. We are implicated, we are part of the event. So this is converged not only around the research, but also this converge about the idea of action. Not only study about, but action about some kind of study. This is what we call it, we name it, we create a concept for this, call it investigation action. Trying to put together these two fields. There's no kind of possibility to do in that time that we put some kind of new perspectives and new forms of perspective of how we see the society. We cannot do this spreading the object and the subject. We need to put all together in the same urgency to transform the society. This kind of tension, it's a tension that moves the research. And this tension, it's not the tension only the intellectual tension, but also the body is in action. And this is, it's could be a little detail, but it's not, because the body in action, it's a body that produces a new kind of language, not language in the sense of speaking language, but language in the sense of tongue. We need to scream something. And the academic field also always was a part of a silence this scream. So I think we all be part of not only artistic field, but also a transformation of academic field. The producing of knowledge is being now transformed by a new paradigm that it's very important to the students understand this. We need to put not only the intellectual, not only the object, not only our capacity to reflect and understand the reality, but also we need to be part of the event, be part of this transformation, be part of the action. And when we do this, we transform also the way of writing our knowledge. You can see here, it's not only about the writing a text about some kind of sociology issue, but also it's about produce image, produce poem, produce also graphics, also materials that we can put all together in the same kind of research. So, okay, I will close the parentheses. And where were we? In the motifs of my mother. Let me show you my mother. I have a proud to show. Also, I will show the publishing house here, the books that we produce in this last 2 decades. This is my mother here. He was the founder of the Frente Fevereiro. She passed away 3 years ago and has this legacy of the struggle, of the reflection, and also the poems that was in this book. I invite all to get this in contact with all our books, some in English, some in Portuguese or in other languages. But okay, in the motifs of my mother call for us to create the actions of around the Flavio's death, the second motivation was the symbolic event. And this is also important to understand the symbolic event. Let's see the face of Flávio Santana here. So Flávio Santana was a middle-class Black young man, some kind of person that criticized this idea, the emphasis of the media, of the killing of a Black middle-class man. This was a kind of event that occurs every time with poor people. But in the case, in our perspective, we saw this as an event very important to understand the reality of the Brazil, the racial reality in Brazil. Here, we have also to open a new parenthesis forward to talk about how the Brazilian construct some kind of instruments and some kind of perceptions around themselves, ourselves, to understand how this kind of racism operate in the society. But for us, this idea of police violence, we need in our action to put some kind of point that was not just violence. It was racially directly violence. We need to racialize this event, create this perspective of the racism of the police. So we need at this time, we are trying to move not only police violence, but police racism, and change the discourse of the media and the semiotic reading of the event. What is the image when we read the image of this event about the killing of this young guy, Black guy? What we read when we see this? And here we saw the judgment of the Flávio, and we put policial races, justice. So this was one of the main points for this first action that became the birth of the collective.
And yeah,
Diga.
This was the trial of the policeman who killed Flávio.
Perfect. Please help me to explain. So this case was exemplary because in our society, Brazilian society, we have always this discourse that persists until today in the left party around the idea that we live in a conflict exclusively about the social class, about the rich and the poor. So for us that we live in America, in societies that brings a whole history around the slavery and extermination, indigenous extermination, this is not enough to think about the society as rich and poor and the conflicts between these two classes. We need to put on the table the idea of the racial profile that creates a situation like this, creates this kind of bias by the police. So for us, this idea of how the society, Brazilian society, create this idea that conflict it's only based on the rich and poor, and the recognition of this poor is how he's dressing, how the people is dressing, how the symbols of consumptions, the social status, it's expressed like car, all these elements. In other words, we learn here that when you have all these elements, you're dressing well, you have some kind of this status of consumption, like car, driving a fancy car, and you have education, you don't talk in a very simple way, but you be part of some kind of academic field, you are out of the focus of the prejudice and the racism. But Flavio showed us that it's not happening. He was a guy that has all these elements, was in a very nice car, dressing very well, and has education, but even in all the situation, he was killed by the police. So this idea of the step-by-step you're getting in the middle class, kind of código of the middle class, you are out of the prejudice. It's now revealed that it's not happening. And here I open another parenthesis. I promise I will be fast here. I open another parenthesis. In all this introduction, I explained for Felipe, I need to talk a little bit about the Brazilian reality, because the questions is around this. So I need to put some kind of context. So we're gonna see here some images, but I will talk in the images. So the another parenthesis that I need to open here, it's the difference between Brazil and United States reality. Many of those questions that we received has deal with all this idea of the difference. But to see the difference now, we need to go back and see the history of these two countries. And what is the main difference or the principal difference between the colonization in Brazil and United States? Here I will put only two points, okay? I put a bullet on Brazil has had the largest slavery labor structure on the planet. 45% of the Black men, women slavery came to Brazilian lands for 4 centuries. So in 19th century, Brazil had the largest Black cities outside Africa. Currently, nowadays, the population of Brazil is mostly recognized as Afro-descendant. Perhaps the better way to call it Afro-descendants, it's Afro-Amerindian, because also in this kind of test, the survey, we have also this idea of the brown denomination that includes the miscegenation of the indigenous also, not only the Black population. So we've talked now as Afro-Amerindian in different situation of the United States. We are not minority here in Brazil. We are majority here in Brazil. We are the biggest part of the population in Brazil recognize themselves as Black population or Afro-Amerindian, Afro-descendant. So also the second point, and this is very important to know, we are majority, and the Brazilian society creates a kind of dispositive to bring this idea, but not with the conflict that this idea has. So the second point that I put it as different, Brazil has a very intense miscegenation, mostly based on the rape of the Black and indigenous woman. I will stop here, and I will show a graph that I need to show also. Here we have this graph. The miscegenation of Brazil has a study about the DNA, a recent study about the DNA in Brazil. What we see in the first and second line, this is the heritage of the mother, of the woman. And here the heritage of the father. And this very colored, I don't know this, purple. This purple here is the European DNA. So you is able to see that the mother or the ancestral of the woman is just a part of this. Or in other words, the white woman had a few part of our DNA, but the father, the man European, has a very large part of our DNA in the Brazilian society. And see here, the indigenous, Afro-American indigenous here, and also here as a man. So what we see here, that main part became from the man, white man, to create the miscegenation. And this brings our conclusion that man is study about this, the conclusion that our society was based on rape, against the Black woman and the indigenous woman. Here in Brazil, we have this kind of story that until today, the students tell this in a very easy way in the class about the grandfather that laced an indigenous woman, kidnapped an indigenous woman. And this idea of the rape create a society extremely, also the rape, but also the slavery and the extermination of indigenous, create a very violent and segregation history. But how we can continue as a society without a war, a really war based on races? We create 2 points I will put here: an efficient social mechanism and discourse to accommodate the conflicts. One is whitening. When you are observing and you has this illusion of essential truth, they assimilate the codes and the way of life of white elite. And this happening mainly in the middle class. The middle class is the point, the space for this conflict. The idea of if you become more white, include the light skin, you will be more accepted. But mainly, it's not the skin. It's mainly the idea of bring all these codes of the white society, the white elite. And also the other instrument, very efficient, and the Frente Fevereiro, the collective, will work with all these 2 points, is the racial democracy. The idea of we live in a mixed society, and we widespread and theatralize the discourse of there's no racism, no structural racism in Brazil, but a small punctual prejudice, but not a structural racism. So this is all about the movie and the book. The idea of disconstruction of the whitening and the racial democracy. And this is why we choose the football, the big flags, the fans, and the football mainly as example of the main and the most important discourse about the racial democracy, when all the players playing in the same nation to be together in the same objective to defeat another nation, and we are as one without difference between colors and ethnies. So I will go back to Flavio and stop at this introduction. So Flavio was the example of this both discourse and the fragmentation, the broken of this ideology. He was well-dressed, driving a car, well-educated, and not escaping to be murdered by the police. The police telling, and even the movement, social movement, was in that time saying, oh, this is police violence. And we are saying, no, this is racial bias. We have a racial perspective in this. This is a racism. It's not only about the conflict of class, poor and rich. So I will pass the word for Felipe to talk a little bit, and let's hear a little bit here. Quando você quiser, Felipe.
Okay. Well, Daniel has done a brilliant explanation about this history of racism in Brazil and how this affected the creation of our collective of Frente de Fevereiro. So it got started from, I will try to be very quick because we are already running out of time. It started with a call from Daniel's mother, Maurinete, who called some friends, some people that knew each other, like, let's do something about this because this case is so emblematic of all these questions that Daniel explained. And we draw on several experiences of early collectives in Brazil. Daniel was part of some collectives before, and also other members of the group participated in other artistic collectives in São Paulo. And so we had already this tradition of recent tradition of doing this kind of interventions. We call it urban interventions, this interventions of art in the public space, in the streets. And so when we started the collective, the idea was, let's draw attention to these issues regarding this case specifically of Flavio's death. So we started doing this this action in the place where he was murdered. We put this sign on the floor marking the memory of the event, saying here Flavio Santana was killed by the police. And then we also did this action of putting this poster saying police races, who polices the police? Like, who watches the police? And from that, we started generating, we started meeting a lot of people. The collective grew to 21 people at its highest point. And we kept doing these actions. And then we were invited in 2005, I think, to open Video Brasil, which is a film, an independent film festival, audiovisual festival here in São Paulo. And we were invited to open this festival with audiovisual presentation. And it was the year that these things that are happening here in the screens, it was a case of a black Brazilian soccer player who was called a monkey by an Argentinian player, and the Argentinian player was arrested at the end of the game for because of racism, which is a criminal. There is a law saying that is a crime. So this generated a lot of media discussion about all the sports shows discussing if this was right or wrong, if it was racism or not. So we took this opportunity that this question, that this issue was being discussed, and created the interventions of the banners in the stadiums that you saw on the movie, with phrases questioning this idea of the place of Black people, of the racial democracy that that soccer is supposed to represent in Brazil. And after doing the intervention, we developed this presentation. We put together a group of musicians, and we created a narrative that was much inspired by the spoken word movement of the US. So this idea of rhythm speaking, poems, this tradition of Gil Scott-Heron, the last poet, Saul Williams, and so we created this figure that was a narrator, but also a character that was narrating the things and conducting this presentation together with the music and together with footage from the interventions that we did. And so this is the first time that we started to develop this idea of different artistic languages talking together and creating different layers of understanding to the public. And so this already gave us, and then the year after we won a contest here in Brazil by the state television and the Ministry of Culture to do a documentary, to produce a documentary. And so that's the film O Zumbi Somos Nós was made, commissioned by this program. And so we started to think about how are we going to develop this narrative and these ideas that were in this audiovisual presentation influenced us to create this idea of a narrator that is also that is a character narrator, somebody that takes part in the content. It's not just telling things from a neutral point of view, but using this idea of spoken word and relating to music. Danielle, you want to talk a little bit about the musical conception?
Yes, we can talk about, as I told it, about the knowledge, the producing of knowledge, and how we are in the face of a new paradigm of the dealing with the academic field. We are thinking about the music also as a discourse. How can we talk and be visible all this resistance, historical resistance that was totally invisibilized in our society? How can we put this in our movie, in our production of knowledge, in a way that also touched the people? And this is the music. The music has a power, a very different layer of the power of not only touch this idea of I will put the sound here less because I will not concentrate enough, but this idea of micropolitica, politics, Philippe? Micropolitics. This idea of micropolitics, not only as a small scale of the politics, but also about the internal way how when we conceive and how the connective of our way to think about the society. So the music has this capacity in this potential way to cross this level of micropolitics. So this is a possibility to bring history, but also to bring a new way to touch the people about these issues. So the music, it's an element that it's not a sonoplasty, like the music above the scene, but it's the one of the layers of the scene. And we have here in the event many layers, not only the sound layers. We have the fans, we have our music, we have on the stage the MC, the spoken word. We have many layers to connect in the same line of the narrative, but also we have the many layers of the image, like one image like this. One image like this, we have the image in the stadium, the image that we are on the stadium, the image that we recorded, the image that was broadcast by the television, and the image that bring all this together on a movie. So it's a kind of a fractal image and a fractal way to think about the layers of the construction of the audiovisual in the audio field, but also in the video. Okay, Felipe.
Yeah, and so just I think to finish, and so we can open up for questions. We put this together, this idea of a mixture of influences, putting together new urban sounds coming from hip hop to the Afro descendant rhythms in Brazil, the traditional African descendant rhythms like samba, like Brazilian soul music, and rhythms from the Brazilian Afro religion, and that's what created this musical discourse. And also we did the project as a trilogy. We did the film, the book that Daniel showed, and we did a musical album too. So we had these three products from the same effort, and the album is on Spotify. I think Misael sent you the link, and I think, Daniel, we can open for questions now. What do you think?
Let's show show the one work after the movie,
okay,
just to put this dimension that the work, when we saw the movie, for me it's very clear that has three parts. We have one part that's a policial racism, and we have the second, it's about the racial democracy, the idea of the flag, the football as a symbol of racial democracy. And the last part, this part in Germany, we talked about no-go areas. Or, in other words, we are talking about the geographic exclusion. How we connect all these three elements. We begin with the racial profile and all this brutality of and racism of the police, and understand that it's a part of a very huge discourse that there's no racism in Brazil. And after we are confronting this idea, how the cities reproduce and divide the cities and create invisible walls. In that way, we started a new line of research, as I told in the beginning. The new way, it's a more geopolitical way to understand that we are all connected. We are connected not only as part of the Brazilian society or Germany here, but we are connected in all America with the colonization. All America suffering with these three elements: the slavery, the extermination of the natives, and the rape as a practical a war tactic to dominate a society. So we, in this layer, we connect all the American society. And I want to show here one work that we did with Sombatá in Colombia. Colombia, as Brazil now, developed one of the most exported technology of control. This technology of control, the Black population mainly, that was called in that time in Colombia, pacified police, and also was implemented in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, for the World Cup, for the Olympic Games. The idea of a whole system of the police and the state of the police constantly in the poor community, poor and Black communities. So here we visit our friends in Colombia. Felipe can talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, we did this project
just to hear the beginning of the music. Sombatá. So we had this kind of connection to understand that our research about the music, it's not about the Brazilian music mixed with the spoken word, Gil Scott Heron, and hip hop and all the influence of hip hop, but also in the Caribbean and also in Cuba and also in other parts of the America, that we can construct a discourse, a musical discourse, but not as a theory, but as action, in kind of exchange with all these musicians around the America. Desculpa, Felipe. Sorry, Felipe.
Yeah, this is a project we did in Medellin. This is Comuna 13, is one of the most, was one of the most violent places in Medellin. And it was in 2002, there was this military operation to occupy the community. And it is occupied by the military until now. But this is a group of young Black people who created this cultural center to teach kids about Afro-Colombian music, Afro-Colombian dance, Afro-Colombian heritage, together with hip hop and this kind of thing. So we went there, we stayed 3 weeks there working with them. We did a song that we recorded over there, some parts, then we brought back to Brazil to record some parts here. So it was also a musical exchange.
Perfect. Just to finish, I will show another fragment. Here's the rehearsal of our friends in Colombia, but we propose for them to create the music together with Frente, 3 de Fevereiro. They bring it a very traditional song in Colombia, in the Afro-Colombia culture, that's saying about we are not working in the mina,
in the mines.
In the mines. We are not working in the mines. This is the song. So I think we finished this first part. Thank you.
Great, thank you both for that presentation. I threw in the chat links to all the amazing resources that Felipe and Daniel spoke about, including the documentaries Zumbi Somos Nós, which is available subtitled in English on YouTube, link to the publications on Issue from Invisíveis Produções, and also a link to Frente's album, which is now on Spotify. So please check those out if you haven't done so already. And thank you again, Felipe and Daniel, for sharing such, I think, rich history that I think gives us a lot to think about in terms of the resonances that exist, as you spoke about, not just in Brazil, but really throughout the Americas. We received a lot of questions that were thinking a little bit more about those resonances, which maybe we can get to a little bit later on. But there were also a couple that were just curious about how it is that you come up with what those banners say in the soccer stadiums. I think like those are really beautiful forms of protest and of really, I think, embedding a political message within a larger public discourse and dialogue, that is kind of this mass spectacle of sports. So there was a question about how the process is to come up with what those will say, and also what happens afterwards. Like, is there anything that comes of them, maybe negative repercussions for you all in terms of unfurling those in the ways that you do? So if you could maybe speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Daniel, you want to talk, or you want me to explain?
Oh, the point that I want to put is that we in the time of the Frente de Fevereiro collective, as Felipe talked about, we all already created another collectives. So the French came in a moment very mature of the discussion of the collective production, collective way of producing knowledge and creating art. And this is, in that point, there's a kind of pedagogy
Mm-hmm.
that puts in this kind of, it's not methodology, because methodology is a concept very fixed, but it's a way to produce in a horizontal way, in a very horizontal, respecting the difference between the people, the formation, the background, a professional more specialized. It's not up to the other. Everybody can say about the music, everybody can say about the poems. In that context that we created the flags, the big flags. So the big flags was a very worked way to getting in the three words, a very small sentence, but created with like 20 persons' opinion at the same time. And we see a little bit of this practice in the workshop that we did in Berlin. Mm-hmm. So this is a kind of, I call it a social technology, not only me, but others talking about the social technology. Our society, to be transformed in a more democratic, justice, and more horizontal way, needs to develop ways to produce this dynamics, to produce the political field, the political decisions. And this has a lot to do with the collectives and a lot to do with the developing of social technology.
Yeah, just to complement the idea of the flags, we decided to work with this issue of racial democracy in soccer, because of this case that was gaining much attention by the media. And so in Brazil, the cheering of the teams, they are used to putting up these huge flags, but they are flags of the teams. They are flags just to cheer for the team. And the television is used to showing when they are broadcasting the game. When the organized cheering puts these flags up, they usually show it in the television. But when they show, they cannot know what is going to come up in the flag. So we analyze this and say, okay, this is an opportunity to intervene in a mass media. You can, if you put a message there, you can reach. This was the first one was in the final game of the Libertadores Cup, which is the most important tournament in the Americas. So we said, if we can put the flag there, probably that we don't know, but maybe the television will show, and so this message will spread even much more than we can do by ourselves. So we got together with we fought in our collective about the message, the phrase, but we had to partner with the organized cheering organizations because they were the ones who were able to put the flags up and have the people and all of that. So we were like 4 people of our collective there in the game just to bring the flag and, you know, make sure everything goes right. And actually the television showed. So we were broadcasted through all Latin America, maybe all the world, with this banner. So and in the case of Berlin was interesting because we went there because of the World Cup, and so part of the collective was in Berlin and part of the collective was in São Paulo. And they did a workshop with local groups that work with the immigration issues. And so they did a workshop there one day to think about the phrase. They sent us in Brazil the ideas that they had. We discussed in Brazil and suggested some other things. And in the end, the other day, they got together there and liked our ideas and put together and came up with this no-go area idea. So we could even work together, being apart, like a part in Germany and a part in Brazil.
There's a follow-up question from Sherry about that. And they ask, were there any repercussions for the banners at the game?
Well, since the most important thing was for the organized cheering people to be okay with it, because they are the ones who run the show. So if they were not okay with it, we wouldn't be able to do it. So and the police in the games, they have this process that they kind of check the banners that go in together with the leaders of this cheering. So we didn't have problems inside the stadiums with the banners because it was already everything. We had an agreement with everybody to put the flags there. So we didn't have problems with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
Just to complement, in some way, when we think about this intersection between art and political movements, this issue that is political, and it's micro-political, but also micro-political in the sense of the perception of the reality and the sense of the structure. When we, as artists, thinking about this and create actions about this, we need to put out the idea of efficient. This is the political movement. The political movement has a program and an objective. The artist is dealing with another kind of step of the society. We are talking about decades, about years and years, maybe 100 years. Some of these flags now is on some museums, in books, and books for children, in movies. We are now discussing about this flag, those flags, more than 10 years after. So this is a kind of spread of the discourse and the impact that it's a different wave. It's not instantaneous and more focused on the political agenda, but it's more about how can we construct the idea and spread the idea, not only the message, but how the message was constructed. This is why we studied and we are talking about how the message was constructed. This is also could be made by a company, broadcast company also, this kind of event. But how we can construct, it's so important, and this create a new level and a new time, a different time to spread the message, to spread all this ambient and this devir as a society.
Thank you for that response. We have another question here from the Q&A from Troy. He asks that whether there's things like hair color and texture, if those have a bearing on how people are perceived. I'm imagining in Brazil, because you mentioned that skin color has an influence on the way that a person is treated. So I think Troy is asking around other kind of elements of self-fashioning, and if those continue to be indicators that could determine how one is treated in Brazil.
Felipe, do you want to answer?
Yeah, can be. Yes, in Brazil is there's a history of studies about races, and a lot of theory that says that the races in Brazil is a little different from racism in the US, because in the US it has to do with the blood. So if your ancestors were black, you were considered black. In Brazil, it's much more phenotypical, much more how you look. If you look white, even if your father is black or your grandfather is black, you are considered white. And if you have your hair more curled, then okay, so you're mixed, so you're black. So yes, all these phenotypical traces are very much present in races, and also there was this growth from the Black movement that, for example, people used to, I don't know how to say that, like try to make their hair more thin, less curly, because they were ashamed of the hair. And so this was one of the things that the Black movement gained a lot in the last decades, that people are more proud to wear, their afro and this kind of things as a sign of empowerment and, of affirmation of Blackness.
Cool. Yeah, there was actually another question from Taryn Rose about that that maybe you can speak about. She asked, in the time that your group has been active in activism, have you seen progress being made in terms of social or racial justice? And Betty Jo had a related question, if people are becoming more active in the movement for racial justice in Brazil?
Wow, this is a complex complex question, thank you, and also complex answer, because yes and no. Yes, in the way of micro-political way, in the terms of the perception, the self-perception, the society has big steps to recognize ourselves as Black population. Has the biggest slavery process in the world, and we now are facing all the affirmative actions around the university, also in the political agenda for the Congress, and all this kind of roles that political occupy. Has a discussion about affirmative actions. So also we see a very not tangible way to the empowerment of the young. Now, Felipe was saying about this kind of shame of the hair, but now you find in the street big hairs and all these young girls very proud of the hair, and the Black guys proud of the culture. So this is a very huge change that I live this in this few years, not so few, for 4 decades, this change of the perception and the change of the subject, the discussion of this is more on front. But in other hand, in a macro political way, we find numbers and research that show that Brazil is more violent against the young population, Black population. So we have action and a reaction, very conservative and very violent, and all this possibility, the social flood, the social put on the crossing the barriers, the invisible walls, create very strong and violent reactions. So it's yes and no for this answer, I think.
Yeah, I believe there was an increase in Black organizing, in Black mobilization, and the agenda of fighting races gained much more attention, much more space in the media. And Frente Fevereiro was part of a history of Black movement, but also I believe it was, our work was kind of intermediary, because we've seen a big rise in Black feminism and this kind of things a few years after our collective started. We cannot say that we were responsible for that. I think we were part of a movement that was growing. But I think there was this increase in past years. But what Daniel says right is that the level of homicides in Brazil kept growing throughout all those years, even in the leftist governments that were the governments in which Black people gained affirmative action in the universities, a lot of measures by the state to try to fight racism. But at the same time, the structure of violence and police racism and this kind of things got worse and worse, and didn't get better. So it's two sides of the story.
Thank you for that. So one of the things that we were reading about in my sound studies class is the relationship between sound and empathy, how sound may have a particular ability to create empathic responses. And there's a question here that somebody has for you that leads it, I think, kind of addresses that. And they say, hello, Daniel, Felipe. Thank you for this insightful presentation. I had a question in regards to your songwriting process. Danielle mentioned that music has the power to touch those who listen to it, and its ability to traverse boundaries to convey important political messages. So the question is, I was wondering how this element plays a part in the way you write your music. In other words, are you writing your music to specifically touch the lives of individual listeners?
Wow, thank you very much. And thank you, Christine, to put the words that I'm not able in English to put about this sympathy, this capacity to transversal the society. So it's not focused on one kind of public and kind of people. What I think we have as a, let's try to begin again. When we talk about methodology, I talk about, we are talking about some kind of fixed event, fixed process. And this fixed process mainly is toxical. To believe that you are a guide for a fixed process that was invented in the beginning of the process and continue until the end, it's a way to lose all this passion for the world. So in my sense, it's a toxical element. So what we need as artists and research, academic research, it's always invent the way. So this is a way to invent the way to create the music background. It's It's not agenda, a process, a program, but it's more about the influence that appears when we saw all the reality around us, and we know that we are carrying in our blood, in our culture, in our background culture, all these influences. We don't need to invent this, because our ancestors playing the drums. So when I hear all this kind of level of the drums, I know that has a connection with the hip hop. It's a very long time between the two, but I know there's a connection. What we need to put, it's create a discourse, put all this element in a kind of bricolage and put together in the same kind of rhythm, and create this ambient. So in that sense, we create our public, we create our main public, we create all this idea of the future that we're gonna listen this music. And this is it's an invention of a nation. In one sense, we have the denouncing of our society, but we have to announce another society. And we announce this by the poetry, by the creation of the poetry. So it's not, it's inverse. We are not creating for a people. We are creating to, creating a new people.
Yeah, and another thing that I think it's good to explain is that the collective was very big, 21 people, and we had artists from several different kinds of art. So we had musicians, we have people who were filmmakers, we had designers, we have people who weren't artists before, like myself, and or were professors or were students. So and we tried to make this idea that was sometimes hard but very enriching, which was we discussed everything in the collective. So when we did the film, it was not the filmmakers who were the directors who would say, okay, we're going to film like this, we're going to put this together. No, everybody got together and said, okay, how are we going to put this film together? How are we going? And with the music, the same thing. Of course, the musicians had knowledge of music. They were able to play. But everybody had a say in the process of writing the music. There was this dialogue of different languages and different artistic languages to create all of this art of the collective.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really like that idea of just not denouncing, but also announcing. It's really about reimagining. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that that's also resonant with some of the ideas that we've been exploring in our class, having to do with improvisation as a radical, like, political strategy, where it's leaving open the capacity to invent something new, right? And to do so as part of a group, to do so in the moment, and to, as you're saying, Daniel, like, invent a future together, right? And I think that that's definitely important and resonant with some of the other art forms that you also bring up, and ones that we've been looking at in class. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Maybe we have time for one or two more questions. I wanted to get to this one.
Can I just add one quick thing? Yeah. We forget to say, but there was an important step in the creation of the music. There was a jam session that we did after the presentation that we created to do the film. We did a jam session in which we put together the musicians. We called some rappers invited some rappers, put everybody together. Say, okay, let's make some sounds, let's create some things and record this. And at the end, the main song, which was the one that you played at the beginning, came out directly from the jam session. Like we recorded after in the studio, but it wasn't as good as it was like in the jam session. So we stick to the the jam session version. So it was also this idea of improvisation, of put everybody together and making something happen.
Yeah, great. That's awesome. That's a great point, and thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to get to this question that came up a lot, and I think you spoke a little bit about it, Daniel, in the presentation, which is around resonances between the Brazilian context and, of course, the context in the U.S. And I think a lot of people had the mobilizations that were happening here last year in response to the murder of George Floyd and others, and the movement for Black Lives. And I think that's, when we touched base, Daniel, you said something that I think stuck with me, which is like, you all worked on this issue, you know, almost 15 years ago, or like, you know, more than a decade ago, and it feels so resonant and so present and so like new. And that sucks, kind of, you know, that like in all this time, we're still talking about this issue, and it feels, I think, important and resonant to our own context. So I don't know if you just had some other thoughts to share. We had a question from Cameron, for example, who was wondering about your opinion on the state of policing in the US. Daniel wanted to know specifically about the parallels between Black Lives Matter movements and those happening in Brazil. And Rianne wanted to know if you all have any plans on doing an art piece in the US, thinking again about like the fact that police brutality and issues of anti-Blackness and anti-racism are so important right now, and feel so resonant to our current moment here in the US. So I don't know if you all just want to like say a few more words about that.
Yes, just to say the importance of this geopolitical research. I think that we have the connection between Black Lives Matter and Brasil Negro Salve Brazil. It's a kind of spirit of the time. It's the same way to deal with the very unique and poetical and very synthetic way to talk about some subject. And I think we did this, and I think we are connecting in some level. It's not a political connections between meetings and encounters, but I think we spread this idea, and also we took this idea for the political movements around the United States, in Cuba, in Colombia. We have this way to see the work that we did as a cartography. So it's not a map. We cannot map things as the colonizers did with the world. We are only able to connect points, make a cartography, and for each point, choose what is the elements, what is the instruments to touch this topography, this reality. And this is, it's a way also to make this bricolage, as Felipe talked about the jam session. We are doing a jam session for 1 decade with the Colombians guy, the Cuban, in United States. It's important to put here that we did research and a creation in New York, and about the gentrification of the neighborhood, Harlem neighborhood, and also in Baltimore about the riots. We have a very amazing and very actual talking and interview about this situation and the racial conflicts. So as I talked about it, I think we are doing a kind of cartography and a bricolage and a big jam session around America with many musicians, and put different kind of elements together. And I think we are constructing a kind of music album to hear her about in some decades forward. Felipe?
Yeah, and I think our research has a lot to do with this interconnected technologies of social control, of militarized social control, which the US is a big part of it. Many US police export techniques to Latin American police units, you know. And Brazil also, in our research, we connected Rio de Janeiro with Medellin, with Haiti. The Brazilian military was in Haiti also, and they learned from the Rio de Janeiro police, and they also brought back some technology. So, and the inspiration came from Medellin. So there is all this this exchange in experiences, and I believe we also try to make another kind of exchange of cultural exchange of resistance. So to connect, so we go to Medellin and connect with the Black young men from the Comuna 13, you know, who do music and resist there. And we go to Haiti and connect with the people there, connect with Haitian immigrants here in Sao Paulo. So we go to the US and talk to the people in Baltimore, in the West Baltimore, that lived in the riots. So we're trying to build this other kind of exchange to counter this oppressive exchange in the Americas. And just, I think there is an important thing to highlight, that although there are many similarities, there are also differences between the US situation about police violence and in Brazil, because I believe in Brazil, it's so the number of people killed by the police every year is much higher than in the US. So in the US, we see kind of like, when some policeman kills one Black man, you know, it's a riot, it's people go to the streets and burn. Here, the police is killing like dozens of people every day. And sometimes, yeah, the Black movement try to mobilize, but it's just not like an outstanding thing. Oh, the police killed a Black man. No, it's like a regular thing. So, for example, Flavio Santana was one case that gained the media because his father was a retired policeman, and so there was like an exceptional case. So, but a lot of people are killed, and most of the time we don't even know their names, or we don't have footage of what happened. Like in the US, I think they have more, and this also generates more mobilization. So there's also those differences.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And
Misael, just to point one connection with the talk of Felipe, the speech of Felipe, and also I want to bring two questions that you send us, just to point a final idea. Kerstin talked about healing process. Also, Elaine talked and asked about some way to create suggestions about the working with a small community. And I want to talk a bit because I think those questions create this idea of the perspective of urgency, the struggle for life, the need. And this is, I think, all work that we did, it's a kind of healing process. It's a healing process for the society, but mainly for ourselves. But not as a therapy, individual therapy, but a collective therapy, public therapy that deals with this kind of violence that Philippe are talking about. We are talking about 160 person killed all the days, the year, even more in the pandemic time. So it's a lot of killing. We need to create some kind of way, emergency way to deal with this, all this violence and all this kind of no way out. And we create this around this announcing a new futures. Yesterday I saw the movie about Sam Cooke, two murders of Sam Cooke, some kind of that. It's the change is gonna come. We need to believe this, but not believe as a utopia. Believe in doing something, and we are all parts of this creation. And the research, it's not separate of this. Research is a creation. The art is a creation for a new a change is gonna come. A new world is gonna come.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Daniel. And those were the two questions that I wanted to get to. And one was just, I think, thinking about this sharing of technologies, right? Not just of that are oppressive, but also that are liberatory, that I think allow for resistance and allow for healing. I think that that's really important. I don't know, Felipe, if you had any kind of comments around this, specifically on Elaine's point around suggestions. I think they were thinking about how to within a small community start calls to actions through art. And they were just asking music, art shows, like if you all had any suggestions in terms of sharing those technologies, of resistance and liberation. So I don't know, Felipe, if you have any thoughts around that.
I think one of the ideas that was central to the creation of Frente was the idea that in our current times, everything's so fast and the internet and all these kind of things, we cannot rely anymore on these old forms of political mobilization, like, oh, so something happens, so okay, so we need to bring 100,000 people to a march to, put pressure on the government, this kind of things. It was more of the idea, okay, let's put together some friends, some people who know each other, who want to do something, and let's figure out creatively ways of doing simple things, putting banners in the streets, or coming up with the idea of putting a banner in the state in a soccer game, and then the television will show and will gain much more attention than just putting in the streets. So this idea of we don't need to have like, okay, a political party or a social movement. Of course, they are all important. We support, we bring our banners to the demonstrations also, but we don't need to wait for that to happen so we can do something, I think this is the main suggestion. I think they will have that. It was very important for me when I entered the collective, because I was in the university. I had participated in the students movement, which is a more traditional social movement. And so participating in this collective, like, opened my mind to, okay, we can figure out new ways of kind of hacking the system, and with few people with good ideas, do some difference and maybe change how people see things. And I also like to talk about one thing that I forgot, the questions about the response to the flags in the stadiums. We also, when we were discussing the collective, we also think we don't want to put a flag saying like end races, or like this traditional political statements. We all thought a lot about phrases that question things, that open the minds of people, like, okay, Brazil, save Black Brazil. What does that mean? Like, where are Black people? Like, okay, what is he talking about? Each person will have a different understanding. We're not stating like, it's not a political line, to sing in March, but it's things that make people question and maybe wonder, and maybe in that sense change their views on something. So also has to do with this idea.
That's great. Thank you. I really like this idea, the reimagining, and that it's not only artist collectives, but that communities can come together and do their own occupations and reimaginings of spaces, especially to heal trauma that might have happened and in that particular neighborhood. And I'm just thinking about it because I just came back from seeing the George Floyd Memorial. And it was a very living memorial that came out of the neighborhood and out of the people living there, very much like a bricolage. So I was thinking about that. So thank you
Yeah, yeah,
for
thank you.
talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I think just conscious of people's times and in your times. I don't know what time it is now in Sao Paulo. It's past both of your bedtimes maybe. But thank you so much for your generosity in responding to the questions.
Yes.
And I think sharing wonderful tips and suggestions, and I think very powerful ideas around what it means to be in solidarity with communities, and I think to essentially recognize ourselves as part of, not just as individuals capable of change, but also as communities capable of change and transformation. So thank you both for your words and for your work. And yeah, thank you all for joining us for this evening. I don't know if Christine, you want to have the last word for tonight?
No, I'm good. Thanks a lot. Just make certain that everybody, follows us on our Instagram to see our next person coming up, which is Raven. Is it Raven Chacon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be in a couple of weeks from now. So please join us again, our audience. I hope you come back. And thank you so much, Danielle and Felipe, for your time. I really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation. It was a pleasure to share these ideas with you, and congratulations on your initiative and your work there.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I always try to talk with passion, and I believe that we are all connected in the same process. And thank you to open this door to the students, and we all be together in this exchange.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
All right, have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.